The merciless sun beat down on Malik's cracked lips as he staggered through the endless dunes. 3 days without water had left him delirious, his once sturdy frame now a collection of bones wrapped in sunburnt skin. Death felt certain until he spotted it, a massive camel dragging a wooden cart, moving slowly across the horizon, with no master in sight. Strange markings covered the cart's weathered sides, symbols from a language Malik didn't recognize. With trembling hands he approached, hoping for water, food, anything to survive another day in this unforgiving wasteland. The camel stopped, its ancient eyes watching him with what seemed like knowing patience. Malik reached for the cart's covering, pulling back the heavy fabric to reveal its contents. Malik Farouk had once been respected among Cairo's architectural community. At 45, his weathered hands had drafted buildings that would have transformed the city skyline. His fingers now trembled as they traced the outline of his father's broken compass, the only possession he'd managed to keep after everything fell apart. "You always find your way home," his father had told him when presenting the compass on his 18th birthday. The irony wasn't lost on Malik. Home no longer existed. The financial collapse 3 years ago had been swift and merciless. The development company backing his most ambitious project conjured bankruptcy overnight. Investors vanished. Blame settled squarely on Malik's shoulders despite his innocence. His reputation 20 years in building crumbled faster than the abandoned construction site. His modest apartment went first, then his car. He moved in with his elderly parents, watching helplessly as their disappointment aged them further. His mother passed quietly in her sleep last winter. His father followed 3 months later. He died of a broken heart, the neighbors whispered. Malik knew better. His father had died watching his son's slow disintegration from respected professional to hollow-eyed failure. The archaeological expedition had seemed like salvation, a desperate chance to use his knowledge of ancient structures at a remote desert dig site. Even the foreman's skeptical glance at his worn clothes couldn't diminish his hope. 3-month contract, the foreman had said. Accommodations basic, pay in cash weekly. Malik had worked diligently for 11 weeks. Then the funding disappeared. The site closed with no warning. The workers received half their final week's wages, with mumbled apologies. The nearest town lay 60 miles southwest. With his meager savings, Malik purchased supplies for the journey and joined 3 laborers heading in that direction. They walked together for a day before Malik awoke to find them gone, along with his water, food, and the small pouch containing his remaining money. Only the broken compass remained, overlooked in his inner pocket. 3 days he'd wandered after that, rationing the last of a water bottle, found discarded near their camp. His architectural training proved useless against the desert's brutal indifference. Each rising sun diminished his chances of survival. Delirium began on the 2nd day, conversations with his deceased parents, blueprints drawn in sand only to be erased by the wind. By the 3rd day, his thoughts fragmented like pottery shards. His tongue swelled against teeth that felt like foreign objects. His once precise mind calculated the remaining hours of his life with grim accuracy. That's when the mirage appeared. A massive camel pulling a cart adorned with symbols that triggered some distant memory from his architectural studies. Ancient Egyptian, perhaps. Pre-dynastic. His scholarly instincts momentarily overrode his desperation. The compass needle spun uselessly in his palm as he changed direction toward the vision. If death approached in the form of a hallucination, he would meet it with the curiosity that had defined his better years. But the camel and cart hadn't disappeared as he approached. The animal's breath clouded in the cooling evening air. Its fur held texture his parched mind couldn't possibly invent. And those eyes, ancient, knowing eyes that regarded him with neither fear nor aggression. The compass needle steadied, pointing directly at the cart. "Water," he had croaked, the word barely recognizable. The camel kneeled slightly as though understanding his desperation, bringing the cart's edge within his reach. His trembling fingers found the edge of a heavy covering. The fabric felt real, coarse yet finely woven, preserved somehow against time and elements. With strength he didn't know remained, Malik pulled it aside. In that moment, as the last light of day illuminated the cart's contents, Malik Farooq, failed architect, grieving son, dying man, confronted something that transcended his immediate survival. Something that would rewrite his understanding of purpose and destiny. The Western Egyptian desert showed no mercy to those who wandered unprepared. Malik had once read that this vast expanse was not simply a sea of sand, but a complex ecosystem of stone, gravel, and occasional hardy vegetation. Such academic knowledge offered little comfort as the relentless sun transformed his skin into cracked parchment. His fingers traced the contours of an ancient clay water flask he'd found half buried beside a long-forgotten caravan route. Empty, of course, like the promises life had made him. He'd kept it anyway, a talisman of civilization in this barren wilderness. By midday, the temperature had climbed well above 120 degrees. Heat rippled across the horizon, distorting perception and judgment. Malik's shadow shrank beneath him, a diminishing companion in his solitude. Each breath drew superheated air into lungs that seemed increasingly unable to extract life from it. The third day without water had brought the whispers. Not hallucinations exactly. He remained lucid enough to recognize them as manifestations of dehydration, but persistent nonetheless. His mother's voice called from behind dunes. His father's disappointed sighs emerged from the wind. Former colleagues discussed his failures in hushed tones that somehow carried across impossible distances. A man of vision, they seemed to say, who couldn't see what was right before him. Malik's tongue had swollen to fill his mouth, a foreign object that no longer served its purpose. His lips had split in multiple places, tiny fault lines mapping his deterioration. The backpack he carried, emptied of useful supplies by the thieves who'd abandoned him, dragged like an ain across his shoulders. Time became elastic. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, hours compressed into heartbeats. His architectural training had once taught him precision in measurement, but here, such concepts dissolved. There was only endless now, punctuated by pain and the growing certainty of his insignificance. He stumbled over a small ridge and found himself sliding down into a shallow depression. At its bottom lay the skeleton of some desert creature, fox or jackal perhaps, picked clean by scavengers and preserved by the arid air. Malik stared at it without emotion. Soon enough, he would join it, becoming another landmark in this featureless waste. The clay flask slipped from his fingers, making no sound as it landed on the soft sand. He lacked the energy to retrieve it. Such small surrenders marked his gradual submission to fate. When he finally resumed walking, he no longer bothered choosing a direction. The compass in his pocket pointed north, but north held no more promise than south, east, or west. He walked because stopping meant accepting the end, and some stubborn fragment of his being refused that final concession. Mirages began appearing with increasing frequency as afternoon descended toward evening. A shimmering lake, a cluster of palm trees, a Bedouin camp with smoke rising from cooking fires. Malik acknowledged each illusion with a nod, almost appreciative of his mind's desperate creativity. When the camel appeared on the horizon, he categorized it immediately among these phantasms. The animal was impossibly large, its silhouette magnified by heat and wishful thinking. More unusual was the cart it pulled, an anachronism that belonged in a museum rather than this desolate landscape. His architectural background recognized elements of ancient Egyptian design in its construction, perhaps from the Old Kingdom period. A scholarly hallucination, he murmured through cracked lips. How appropriate, yet this mirage behaved differently. It maintained consistency as he blinked. It grew larger rather than dissipating when he changed direction. Most convincingly, it created tracks in the sand, parallel wheel marks, and the distinctive imprints of camel hooves. Malik's heart stuttered in his chest. Real or imagined, this apparition represented his final hope. With renewed purpose, he altered his course to intercept the plodding animal and its mysterious burden. The distance closed with agonizing slowness. Twilight began to soften the harsh landscape, bringing momentary relief from the sun's assault. The camel continued its deliberate progress, seemingly unaware or unconcerned by the desperate man approaching from its flank. When finally within hailing distance, Malik tried to call out. His desiccated throat produced only a rasping whisper that didn't carry beyond his own ears. Still, as though sensing his presence, the massive beast slowed its pace and turned its head in his direction. Those eyes, ancient eyes that had witnessed centuries, impossible of course, yet undeniable in that moment of connection. No ordinary beast stood before Malik. This camel towered at least a hand taller than any he had encountered in his 45 years. Its coat, a rich golden hue instead of the typical tan or brown, caught the fading sunlight like burnished metal. Most striking was the animal's composure, a stillness that suggested not exhaustion but patient waiting. The harness draped across its powerful shoulders appeared ancient, yet perfectly preserved. Intricate symbols had been worked into the leather, hieroglyphics interwoven with geometric patterns Malik recognized from pre-dynastic artifacts. Small copper bells hung at intervals, silent now though they showed no signs of corrosion. Blue and red beads, strung along leather strips, formed protective patterns his grandmother would have recognized as desert magic. "Where is your master?" Malik whispered, his parched voice barely audible. The camel regarded him with amber eyes that reflected intelligence beyond animal comprehension. It made no sound but shifted slightly, turning its body to better display the cart it pulled. Malik approached cautiously, expecting the animal to shy away. Instead, it knelt slowly, bringing the cart closer to ground level, a trained behavior that seemed performed without command. This deliberate action froze Malik in his tracks. Camels were stubborn creatures requiring firm handling. None in his experience would voluntarily kneel for a stranger. His trembling hand reached out, hesitating before making contact with the animal's neck. The fur felt real beneath his fingertips, coarse outer hair, protecting a soft undercoat. The camel's skin twitched slightly at his touch, but showed no discomfort. "How long have you been traveling alone?" Malik asked, not expecting an answer but finding comfort in speaking to another living being. The camel blinked slowly, its long lashes sweeping down and up with deliberate grace. Its breath emerged in a gentle glow in the cooling evening air. No sign of dehydration showed in its eyes or posture, despite the desert's harshness. Malik circled carefully around the kneeling animal, examining the harness connections to the cart. The craftsmanship displayed meticulous attention to the camel's comfort padding at potential pressure points, flexible joints, allowing natural movement. Someone had cared deeply for this animal's well-being. Yet the harness showed signs of incredible age. The leather, while intact, had the patina that came only from decades, perhaps centuries of use. Impossible, of course. No harness could last so long in desert conditions. No camel could live beyond its natural span of years. The animal watched Malik's inspection with what almost resembled amusement. When he completed his circuit, it turned its head to look directly at him, then back at the cart, as though encouraging examination of its burden. "What are you carrying?" Malik murmured, his architectural training automatically assessing the cart's construction. The wooden vehicle defied conventional dating methods. Its design resembled carts depicted in Old Kingdom tomb paintings, a transport for nobility rather than goods. Yet certain elements suggested even greater antiquity. The wheels, solid rather than spoked, had been reinforced with metal bands that showed minimal wear despite the harsh terrain they must have traversed. Most curious were the symbols carved into every wooden surface. Some resembled standard hieroglyphics, but others belonged to no writing system Malik recognized from his studies. These unknown markings seemed to pulse faintly in the twilight, though he attributed this to his deteriorating condition. The camel made a soft rumbling sound deep in its throat, neither complaint nor warning, but something akin to encouragement. It shifted position slightly, presenting the covered portion of the cart more prominently. Heavy fabric draped over the cart's contents, secured with cords that had been elaborately knotted. The covering itself appeared to be linen of remarkable quality, its edges embroidered with blue and gold thread forming protective symbols. Despite exposure to sun and sand, the fabric remained vibrant, as though recently crafted. Malik's survival instincts urged him to search for water, food, anything to sustain life. Yet something deeper drew him to the mysterious cargo. The camel's calm demeanor suggested there was no danger, only revelation awaiting his action. His hand reached for the fabric covering, fingers brushing against material that felt cool despite the desert heat. The camel watched with those ancient eyes, its posture indicating approval of Malik's approach. "What secret have you carried across the sands?" Malik whispered as his fingers found purchase on the covering's edge. The cart's construction defied Malik's professional understanding. As an architect who had studied ancient building methods, he recognized techniques that hadn't been used for millennia. The joinery showed no nails or metal fasteners, only precise wooden pegs and complex interlocking designs that had somehow withstood the desert's punishing conditions. He ran his fingers along the cart's side, feeling hieroglyphics carved deep into the wood. Unlike the weathered inscriptions he'd examined at archaeological sites, these retained sharp definition, as though carved recently. The symbols formed complete sentences rather than isolated words, a narrative waiting to be deciphered. "This belongs in a museum," he whispered, professional interest momentarily overriding his desperate situation. Certain symbols appeared repeatedly, the ankh representing life, the was scepter signifying power, and a falcon with outstretched wings, traditionally associated with divine protection. But interspersed among these familiar glyphs were others Malik had never encountered in any academic text, symbols that seemed to shimmer slightly when viewed from the corner of his eye. The cart's wheel stood nearly to Malik's waist, solid discs of wood, reinforced with bands of an unfamiliar metal, neither bronze nor iron, but something with a subtle bluish tint. Despite their apparent weight, they had left only shallow tracks in the sand, as though the cart traveled with unnatural lightness. From the undercarriage hung small copper bells, similar to those on the camel's harness. Though the evening breeze moved them slightly, they produced no sound. Malik touched one gently, expecting a delicate chime, but it remained eerily silent, despite visible movement. More curious were the small mirrors mounted at each corner of the cart. Their surfaces reflected nothing, not the desert, not the sky, not even Malik's gaunt face when he leaned close. Instead, they seemed to contain swirling darkness, as though opening into infinite space. The camel watched Malik's examination with what appeared to be approval, occasionally shifting position to allow better access to different parts of the cart. Its behavior reinforced Malik's growing certainty that this was no ordinary animal. At the cart's rear, a small stepladder had been attached with leather straps. 3 narrow steps led to the covered portion, an entrance designed for dignified access rather than utilitarian loading. The steps showed minimal wear despite their evident age. Malik's architectural eye recognized the cart's perfect proportions. Its dimensions adhered to the golden ratio, creating a harmony of form that pleased the eye while serving practical function. Such sophisticated design principles suggested royal or religious purpose. The covering fabric lay secured by complex knots that incorporated small fingees beads. Each knot pattern formed a seal, similar to those Malik had seen on ancient tomb doors, intended to detect unauthorized entry. Yet none appeared disturbed, suggesting the cart's contents remained as they had been when originally sealed. His hand hovered over the largest knot, hesitation suddenly overwhelming his curiosity. To break such seals felt sacrilegious, a violation of whatever solemn purpose had sent this strange conveyance into the desert. Yet the camel's watchful gaze conveyed neither warning nor prohibition. The fabric itself presented another mystery. Its weave was impossibly fine, hundreds of threads per inch, far exceeding the capabilities of ancient looms. The deep indigo color had not faded despite exposure to the merciless sun. Gold and silver threads formed border patterns that seemed to shift subtly when not directly observed. Malik's fingers trembled as they traced one particularly intricate hieroglyphic sequence near the cart's front edge. The glyphs depicted a journey, a royal figure departing a palace, crossing desert terrain, approaching a distant settlement. The final symbol showed the figure presenting something to waiting recipients. A diplomatic mission, Malik murmured, his academic knowledge providing context despite his deteriorating physical state. The sun had nearly disappeared below the horizon. In the fading light, Malik noticed something he had overlooked. Small openings along the cart's sides, positioned like windows but covered with the same indigo fabric. Air circulation for whatever, or whoever, trod inside. His heart rate accelerated. The cart's dimensions, the careful craftsmanship, the symbols of protection and royal journey, all suggested the transport of something precious. Something that required both concealment and preservation during desert crossing. Or someone. The camel made a soft sound, almost a sigh, and shifted position, bringing the main covering within easier reach. The invitation seemed unmistakable. With a dry swallow that pained his parched throat, Malik reached for the central knot, securing the fabric. Despite his trembling fingers, it yielded with surprising ease, unraveling in a pattern that suggested it was designed to be opened by specific movements. The covering loosened, edges falling away to reveal what lay beneath. The fabric fell away, releasing a gentle fragrance of lotus and myrrh that had somehow survived entombment. In the cart's center lay a woman, not a woman, a girl, no older than Tissin. Her face bore the serene expression of peaceful sleep rather than death's rigid mask. Her skin maintained an impossible smoothness, amber-toned and unblemished despite the passage of what must have been centuries. She wore royal regalia, a beaded collar of lapis and gold, spread across delicate collarbones, wrists encircled by serpentine bracelets, fingers adorned with rings bearing royal seals. Malik staggered backward, nearly falling. His mind rejected what his eyes perceived. No mummification could preserve a body with such lifelike appearance. Yet here lay a young woman who seemed merely asleep, her chest neither rising nor falling, yet her flesh uncorrupted by time. Her hair, arranged in the elaborate braided style of ancient Egyptian nobility, framed a face of haunting beauty. Geometric patterns had been painted in henna across her forehead and cheeks, symbols of protection for a journey. Her lips, still maintaining their natural color, were slightly parted as though about to speak. She reclined on cushions of a material Malik couldn't identify, neither fabric nor leather, but something that retained perfect resilience despite centuries. Surrounding her were objects typically found in royal burials: alabaster jars sealed with wax, golden figurines representing servant spirits, vessels of blown glass containing what appeared to be perfumed oils. But this was no burial. The arrangement lacked the organizational precision of tomb goods. These objects surrounded her as though for practical use during travel. A writing palette rested near her right hand, its inkcakes still moist within their depressions. A small mirror of polished silver lay beside it, its surface untarnished. Most remarkable was the small wooden box positioned carefully at her feet. Unlike the other objects, this box bore no decorative elements, only a simple royal seal pressed into its lid. The wood gleamed with the warm patina of frequent handling, suggesting particular importance. Malik's architectural training allowed him to recognize the impossibility before him. This wasn't some elaborate film prop or museum reproduction. The craftsmanship, materials and preservation techniques transcended modern capabilities. He was glimpsing something that defied historical understanding. The girl's clothing confirmed her royal status. Fine linen woven to gossamer thinness, dyed with the royal purple that had been worth its weight in gold. A pectoral of gold and semi-precious stones adorned her chest, depicting the goddess march with outstretched wings. The artistry surpassed any artifact Malik had seen in museums. "Who were you?" he whispered, momentarily forgetting his own desperate circumstances. The camel made a soft sound, drawing Malik's attention to a detail he had overlooked. Clutched in the girl's left hand was a papyrus scroll, partially unrolled to reveal elegant hieratic script. Though Malik couldn't read the ancient writing, the royal cartouche visible at the document's beginning suggested a decree or official communication, a diplomatic mission, a royal envoy. A journey interrupted. His gaze returned to her face, struck by the youth of this royal messenger. What circumstances had sent someone so young on a desert crossing? Why had she traveled with no visible retinue or guards? And most perplexing, how had her body remained in this state of perfect preservation? Malik's academic interest battled with superstitious dread. Every instinct warned against disturbing what lay before him. Yet his situation remained dire. Without water, he would not survive another day in the desert. Necessity overwhelmed reverence. With trembling hands, he carefully examined the alabaster containers, searching for anything that might contain water. The first vessel held fragrant oil, the second what appeared to be honey still in liquid form. The third, larger than the others, sloshed with promise when tilted. Water, impossibly preserved. Cool to the touch, when he dipped a cautious finger after breaking the wax seal. Malik hesitated, glancing at the serene face of the royal messenger. "Forgive me," he whispered, before taking a careful sip. The liquid tasted of minerals and something subtly sweet, ancient water from a source long vanished from the earth. It spread cool relief through his parched mouth and throat. With disciplined restraint, he limited himself to small sips, knowing that too much too quickly could be dangerous in his condition. As strength gradually returned, Malik's focus shifted to the wooden box at the girl's feet. Unlike the other artifacts, this item seemed deliberately positioned, its importance suggested by central placement and the royal seal. The camel watched him intently as his hand hovered over the box. The animal's gaze conveyed neither prohibition nor encouragement, only patient waiting, as though this moment had been anticipated through countless desert crossings. "What message were you carrying?" Malik asked the silent figure, his hand closing around the simple wooden container. Malik withdrew his hand from the wooden box, a sudden reverence staying his curiosity. Night had fallen completely, the desert temperature dropping rapidly. Stars emerged with crystalline clarity, casting just enough light to illuminate the cart's contents. The girl's face seemed to glow with an inner luminescence that defied explanation. His immediate dilemma pressed upon him with renewed urgency. What should he do with this discovery? Archaeological ethics demanded, he reported to authorities. Professional obligation required documentation before anything was disturbed. Human decency insisted on treating the girl's remains with respect. Yet none of these considerations addressed his immediate survival needs. "I cannot leave you exposed to the elements," he said to the silent figure, deciding to at least restore the protective covering. As he reached for the fallen fabric, his hand brushed against the cart's side panel. A section moved slightly at his touch, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay several water skins made of some unfamiliar material, not leather or canvas, but something that had maintained flexibility despite extreme age. Malik lifted one cautiously. It felt heavy with liquid. When he loosened the stopper, the unmistakable scent of fresh water reached him. Impossible, yet undeniable. He took a careful sip, then a longer drink when no ill effects immediately manifested. The water tasted clean and cool, with the same subtle sweetness as that in the alabaster jar. His survival now somewhat assured, Malik's thoughts cleared enough to consider his next actions. The nearest settlement lay at least 2 days' journey away, assuming he could even find the correct direction. Without the camel and its water supply, his chances remained slim. "You've been traveling alone for some time," he said to the massive animal, which watched him with patient eyes. "Would you allow me to accompany you?" The camel made a soft huffing sound that Malik chose to interpret as a scent. Its continued placidity in his presence suggested it might accept his guidance or perhaps offer its own. He carefully restored the covering over the girl, ensuring she was protected as she had been before his discovery. The reverent act felt important, though he couldn't articulate why. The seals he rebound as best he could, though his knots lacked the intricate patterns of the originals. With water now available, Malik's most pressing concern became shelter from the rapidly cooling night. The temperature would drop dangerously low before dawn. He had no tent, no blanket, not even a proper jacket. The camel solved this problem by kneeling fully, creating a windbreak beside the cart. Its massive body radiated surprising warmth. When Malik cautiously settled beside it, the animal made no objection. Instead, it seemed to shift slightly, accommodating his position. "Thank you," Malik whispered, taking another measured sip of water. He leaned against the cart's wheel, contemplating his extraordinary situation. After days of facing certain death, he now sat beside a seemingly ancient camel and cart containing a perfectly preserved royal messenger. The water skins hidden within the cart's compartment would sustain him long enough to reach civilization if he could determine the correct direction. Sleep came with unexpected swiftness, his exhausted body surrendering to rest, now that immediate survival seemed possible. His dreams were vivid and strange, filled with images of ancient palaces, desert journeys, and diplomatic ceremonies. In these dreams, he walked beside the girl from the cart, observing her presentation of scrolls to solemn recipients. He awoke to pre-dawn light and the gentle nudging of the camel's nose against his shoulder. The animal had risen and stood ready, harness jingling silently in the still air. Its eyes, reflecting the first hint of morning light, seemed to convey urgency. Malik stood, muscles protesting, after days of harsh treatment. The water had revived him somewhat, but weakness remained. He took another careful drink, rationing despite the seemingly generous supply. "What now?" he asked the camel, feeling only slightly foolish for addressing it directly. After all, this was no ordinary beast. The animal turned its gaze toward the east, then back to Malik. The intention seemed clear. It wished to continue its journey. But whether it would accept Malik's presence remained uncertain. He gathered the water skins from the hidden compartment, securing them in his empty backpack. If he must continue alone, at least he now had means to survive. But the thought of abandoning the mysterious cart and its occupant troubled him deeply. "I should report this find," he said aloud. "But to whom? And how will they react?" The preservation of the girl defied scientific explanation. Her discovery would create sensation, argument, perhaps even conflict over ownership. The camel huffed softly, shifting its weight with subtle impatience. Whatever force had guided it through the desert seemed to urge continuation rather than interruption. In that moment, Malik made his decision. He would not abandon this strange procession. Instead, he would accompany it, at least until he better understood its purpose. Dawn painted the desert in hues of amber and rose as Malik prepared for departure. He had secured the cart's covering, checked the water supply, and mentally plotted a route toward the nearest settlement. The archaeological site where he'd worked lay southwest, perhaps 3 days' journey with proper pacing. There he might find colleagues who would understand the significance of his discovery. "We should head that way," he said, pointing southwest. The camel regarded him with what seemed like polite consideration before deliberately turning east, the opposite direction. "No, that leads deeper into the desert," Malik explained, feeling slightly ridiculous arguing with an animal. "Civilization is southwest." The camel remained oriented eastward, its posture communicating unmistakable intention. When Malik gently tugged the harness, the massive beast didn't resist. It simply refused to move. "You're as stubborn as my old professors," Malik muttered. He circled to the cart's rear, thinking perhaps to push it in the correct direction, when something caught his attention. A small leather pouch had become partially dislodged from beneath the girl's cushions, revealing the edge of what appeared to be papyrus. Carefully, Malik extracted the pouch without disturbing the covered figure. Inside, he found a folded document that crackled with age, yet remained remarkably intact. As he gently unfolded it, he recognized a map drawn in the distinctive style of ancient Egyptian cartography. Unlike the stylized maps in museum displays, this one contained precise distance notations and astronomical references. Major landmarks were indicated with hieroglyphic labels, some corresponding to known ancient sites, others completely unfamiliar. A route had been marked in red ochre, beginning at what appeared to be the royal city and extending eastward into the deep desert. At the map's edge lay a destination marked with symbols Malik didn't recognize. The location seemed to correspond with a region modern Egyptologists considered uninhabitable, a particularly desolate section of the eastern desert where no ancient settlements had ever been documented. Yet the map clearly indicated a journey's end, not just a random point, but a specific destination marked with symbols of habitation. The camel huffed softly, its gaze moving between Malik and the eastern horizon. Its meaning couldn't have been clearer had it spoken aloud. "We follow the map." Malik studied the ancient document with growing fascination. If authentic, and everything about the cart and its contents suggested it was, this map indicated knowledge of desert regions not documented in any archaeological record. Following it might lead to an unprecedented discovery, or deeper into lethal terrain with no hope of rescue. His academic instincts warred with survival concerns. The rational choice was clearly to head southwest toward known civilization. Yet something deeper pulled him eastward, the same intuition that had guided his architectural designs in happier days. "You've been following this route all along, haven't you?" he asked the camel. The animal blinked slowly, its expression almost sage-like in the morning light. "How long have you been traveling, and why continue after your passenger?" He couldn't finish the thought. The perfect preservation of the girl defied explanation, as did the camel's apparent age and purpose. As if responding to his unspoken questions, the camel knelt, bringing the cart level in an invitation to examine it further. Malik approached, noticing details previously overlooked in the darkness. The wheels showed minimal wear despite their evident age. The wood retained a polish that should have been impossible after extended desert travel. Most curiously, the tracks behind the cart extended only a short distance before disappearing, as though the camel and its burden had materialized recently rather than traveling across the dunes. "What are you?" Malik whispered. The camel offered no answer beyond patient waiting. When Malik finally stepped back, it rose smoothly and again oriented eastward. A decision point had arrived. Follow conventional wisdom and head southwest toward known settlements, or trust this strange procession and journey eastward into mystery. Malik glanced at the map once more, noticing astronomical notings along its borders. His limited knowledge of ancient star charts suggested these indicated optimal travel times, aligned with specific celestial positions. If interpreted correctly, they recommended morning departure. This very morning, the coincidence, if it was coincidence, sent a chill through him, despite the warming day. "East it is," he said finally, folding the map carefully and securing it in his pocket. "But I hope you know what you're doing." The camel made a soft sound that might almost have been amusement before beginning to walk, its pace deliberate, but purposeful. The cart wheels turned with surprising smoothness, leaving shallow tracks that the desert wind would soon erase. Malik fell into step beside the massive beast, his architect's mind already calculating distances and provisions. The water would last perhaps 4 days if carefully rationed. Beyond that, he would be dependent on whatever lay at the journey's end, if anything still existed there, after what must have been centuries since the map's creation. They traveled through the day's harshest hours, the camel maintaining a steady pace despite the punishing heat. Malik marveled at the animal's endurance. No ordinary beast could sustain such effort without rest or water. By mid-afternoon, the landscape had changed subtly. The smooth dunes gave way to rockier terrain, ancient seabeds long since dried to cracked clay. "Nothing can live here," Malik murmured, surveying the desolation. The camel continued without hesitation, following a route invisible to human eyes. As sunset approached, it altered course slightly, heading toward a distant rock formation that jutted from the flat terrain, like the spine of some enormous buried creature. Malik consulted the ancient map, struggling to correlate its markings with the landscape. A symbol resembling the rock formation appeared to mark a significant point along the journey, perhaps a resting place. His hopes for water beyond his limited supply seemed foolish in this barren setting. As they approached the rocks, the camel's pace quickened slightly. Malik squinted against the setting sun, noticing something unusual about the formation. Rather than the haphazard arrangement typical of desert erosion, these rocks showed subtle signs of deliberate placement, too geometric to be entirely natural. "Was this constructed?" he asked aloud, his architectural training recognizing the possibility of ancient human intervention. The answer came as they rounded the largest rock. Hidden from the approach side, a narrow passage opened between towering stone walls. The camel entered without hesitation, the cart barely clearing the narrow gap. Malik followed, immediately feeling the temperature drop as shadows enveloped them. The passage twisted for perhaps 50 meters before opening into a sight that stopped Malik in his tracks. Before him lay a small but vibrant oasis, enclosed entirely by rock walls that rose at least 30 meters on all sides. Date palms clustered around a central pool of clear water. Desert grasses and hardy shrubs created patches of green against the golden sand. Most remarkably, stone structures stood partially buried around the pool's perimeter. Buildings of obvious antiquity, yet unmistakably human design. Their architecture combined elements Malik recognized from various periods, some predating dynastic Egypt. "Impossible," he whispered. "This appears on no modern map." The camel proceeded directly to the pool, the cart wheels leaving clear tracks in sand that showed no other recent disturbances. No footprints, no animal tracks, nothing to suggest this hidden paradise had seen visitors in perhaps centuries. Approaching the water with caution, Malik tested it with his fingertips before cupping a handful to his lips. It tasted sweet and mineral-rich, clearly fed by an underground spring. He drank deeply, then splashed his face and neck, washing away days of accumulated grime and sweat. Only after satisfying his immediate needs did he turn his attention to the structures. Several small buildings surrounded what appeared to be a central plaza, their doorways half buried by accumulated sand. One larger structure dominated the western side, a temple or administrative building featuring columns carved with hieroglyphics, unlike any Malik had studied. Near this main building, partially concealed by a fallen palm, Malik spotted something that sent a jolt of excitement through him. A mechanical device of some kind protruded from the sand, a complex arrangement of stone counterweights and wooden components that had somehow survived the centuries. His examination revealed an ancient well mechanism, designed to draw water from deep underground using minimal human effort. The system's sophistication surpassed anything documented from the period suggested by the surrounding architecture. "This shouldn't exist," Malik said, his professional knowledge failing to explain what lay before him. The camel had knelt near the pool, bringing the cart to rest in a position that caught the last rays of sunlight. The covered figure inside remained undisturbed, the fabric glowing golden in the fading light. As darkness descended, Malik noticed another peculiarity. Small recesses in the rock walls contained what appeared to be ancient lamps, clay vessels filled with some unknown substance. Curious, he examined one closely, accidentally brushing his fingers across its surface. To his astonishment, the lamp kindled immediately, producing a steady flame without smoke or odor. One by one, similar lamps around the oasis perimeter ignited in sequence, creating a ring of warm light that illuminated the entire enclosure. "Some form of ancient technology," Malik muttered. examining the nearest lamp. The fuel showed no signs of diminishing as it burned, defying modern understanding of combustible materials. Movement at the oasis edge caught his attention. A figure stood partially concealed behind a distant palm, observing him with unmistakable intent. Not an animal or trick of light, a human silhouette, motionless and watchful. Malik froze, suddenly aware that this hidden place might have guardians. The camel showed no alarm, continuing to rest peacefully beside the pool. Its calm demeanor suggested the observer posed no immediate threat. "Hello?" Malik called, his voice echoing against the stone walls. "I mean no harm." The figure remained motionless for several heartbeats before withdrawing deeper into the shadows, disappearing without response. Morning arrived with golden light filtering through gaps in the encircling cliffs. Malik had slept fitfully, his rest disturbed by awareness of the mysterious observer. The camel remained undisturbed, seemingly at home in this hidden sanctuary. As Malik washed his face in the pool, a voice spoke from behind him. "The guardian returns after so long." Malik spun to face a lean, elderly man standing beside the cart. His deeply lined face suggested decades under harsh sun, but his posture remained straight and dignified. He wore simple garments of hand-woven cloth, their design neither traditionally Bedouin nor modern Egyptian. At his side hung a leather pouch, and in his hand he held a wooden staff adorned with polished stones embedded along its length. "Who are you?" Malik asked, maintaining cautious distance. "I am Farid," the man replied, his Arabic carrying an unusual accent that Malik couldn't place. "Keeper of the way station. The better question is, who are you, traveler, to arrive with the guardian and the royal messenger?" Malik explained his circumstances, the abandoned archaeological dig, his desperate desert wandering, the miraculous encounter with the camel and cart. Farid listened without interruption, his weathered face revealing nothing. When Malik finished, the old man approached the cart with reverence, his fingers tracing the hieroglyphics with practiced familiarity. "These symbols tell her story," he said softly. "A princess sent to prevent bloodshed between kingdoms. The peacebringer, who never arrived. You can read them?" Malik asked, surprised. Ancient hieroglyphics were decipherable only to specialized scholars, with years of training. Farid nodded. "My ancestors have kept this knowledge through generations. We are the guardians of the crossing, those who maintain the ancient ways and watch for the messenger's return." His explanation raised more questions than it answered. Malik gestured around the oasis. "This place appears on no modern map. How is that possible?" "Because it exists beyond the realm of your maps," Farid replied cryptically. "The ancients knew pathways your modern world has forgotten." He approached the camel, placing a gnarled hand on its massive head in greeting. The animal leaned into his touch with evident recognition. "You've been carrying your burden a very long time," Farid murmured to the beast. "Longer than any could have imagined." Turning back to Malik, he asked, "Have you looked inside the cart?" "Yes," Malik admitted. "I found a young woman, perfectly preserved. It defies scientific explanation." Farid's expression darkened. "You disturbed the seals." "I needed water to survive," Malik explained defensively. "I resealed everything as best I could." The old man sighed. "What's done is done. Perhaps it was meant to be this way. Come, we should examine her properly." Together they approached the cart. Farid removed the covering with practiced movements, murmuring ritual phrases in a language Malik didn't recognize. Sunlight illuminated the preserved figure, and Farid gasped audibly. "It is her," he whispered. "Princess Nefertari of the Fourth Kingdom, the peacebringer, whose disappearance led to generations of war." "How can you possibly know that?" Malik asked. "That would make her over 3,000 years old." Farid gestured to the royal insignia adorning her garments. "These symbols identify her lineage. Our histories record her journey and the tragedy of her loss." He examined her with reverent care. "The preservation is beyond anything I've seen. Our ancestors spoke of royal magic that could suspend time itself, but I never truly believed." His fingers traced symbols on the cart's interior. These tell of her mission, a diplomatic journey to prevent conflict between her father's kingdom and the valley people. She carried terms of alliance, including her own hand in marriage to the valley prince. But she never arrived, Malik surmised. No, her disappearance was blamed on the valley people. Her father launched a war of vengeance that lasted decades. Eventually, both kingdoms fell to outside invaders, weakened by their conflict. Farid's attention shifted to the wooden box at the princess's feet. This would contain the royal decree, the peace terms never delivered. His hand hovered over it without touching. Opening this would be a grave responsibility. The message it contains was meant for the valley elders, not for us. "Does this valley still exist?" Malik asked, incredulous. Farid's eyes met his with surprising intensity. "Yes, hidden as this oasis is hidden, protected by ancient ways your modern world has forgotten. The descendants of the valley people maintain their isolation even now, waiting for a resolution that never came." He straightened, leaning on his staff as he regarded Malik thoughtfully. "Your arrival with the Guardian and the Messenger cannot be coincidence. After thousands of years, why now? Why you?" Before Malik could respond, Farid continued, "There is danger in what you've discovered. Those who seek power would exploit the princess and her artifacts. Others would destroy them as threats to established history." He tapped his staff on the ground for emphasis. "You must decide, architect. Will you abandon this journey, return to your world with tales no one will believe, or will you complete the messenger's mission and bring closure to a tragedy thousands of years in the making?" Malik spent the day absorbing Farid's revelations, his mind struggling to reconcile modern understanding with the impossibility before him. They sat beside the ancient pool as evening approached, the mysterious lamps once again igniting in sequence around the oasis perimeter. "We must examine the wooden box," Malik finally said. "If it contains information that could help us complete this journey, we need to know." Farid nodded slowly. "Perhaps you are right. The seals were already broken by your discovery. The ancient prohibitions may no longer apply." They returned to the cart where the princess lay in her suspended state. The wooden box remained positioned at her feet, its simple design contrasting with the elaborate artifacts surrounding her. Farid carefully lifted it, his weathered hands trembling slightly, with the significance of the moment. "This has remained sealed for over 3,000 years, he murmured, examining the royal insignia pressed into the lid. "Only those of royal blood, or their designated messengers, were permitted to open such containers. Does that include us?" Malik asked. "You were chosen by the Guardian," Farid replied, nodding toward the camel. "That may constitute designation under the ancient laws." With reverent care, he placed the box on a flat stone beside the pool and released the simple wooden catch, securing its lid. The box opened smoothly, its hinges still functioning perfectly after millennia. Inside lay several papyrus scrolls, their edges slightly yellowed, but otherwise remarkably preserved. Atop them rested a smaller item wrapped in linen, a journal bound in thin wooden covers connected by leather cords. "The princess's personal account," Farid breathed, lifting the journal with utmost care. Only the highest royalty were taught the sacred writing. This would contain her private thoughts, separate from the official decrees. He unwrapped the linen covering and gently opened the journal. The pages within contained neat rows of hieratic script, the cursive form of hieroglyphics used for everyday writing rather than monumental inscription. Farid studied the text silently, his lips moving as he translated the ancient words. "She begins by describing her departure from the palace," he said finally. "She was 16 years old, recently elevated to diplomatic status by her father. The journey was her first royal mission, an honor that filled her with both pride and trepidation." He turned a page carefully. "She writes of the marriage arrangement, political in nature, but not entirely unwelcome. She had met the valley prince once during a ceremonial exchange and found him not displeasing in appearance or manner." Malik smiled slightly at the youthful assessment. A diplomatic description for her diplomatic mission. Indeed, Farid agreed, continuing to read. She traveled with minimal escort to demonstrate trust, only 2 guards and a handmaiden. The small party was to symbolize peaceful intentions. His expression darkened. She records growing concern about one of the guards, who seemed to watch her with unsettling intensity. He turned another page, then paused, his fingers tracing a passage with growing agitation. Here she writes of reaching this very oasis. They stopped to rest, but during the night, he fell silent, reading ahead. What happened? Malik prompted. Betrayal, Farid said grimly. The guard she distrusted poisoned her companions while they slept. When she confronted him, he revealed himself as an agent of her father's rival, a general who opposed the peace agreement and sought to trigger war with the valley people. Farid's voice tightened with emotion. The princess realized she would be killed, and her body arranged to suggest valley people assassins. With her last strength, she invoked royal magic, preservation spells taught only to those of her bloodline. She preserved herself, Malik asked incredulously. Not to save her life, that was already fading, but to preserve the truth. Her final entry indicates she commanded the royal camel to continue the journey after her death, carrying her preserved body and the peace decree to its intended destination. Farid closed the journal gently. She didn't expect the preservation to be so complete, nor the journey to take so long. She merely hoped to prevent war by ensuring her body showed evidence of the true culprit. But the camel never reached the valley. Malik surmised. The valley entrance was hidden by ancient magic, accessible only to those who knew the proper approach. Without the princess's guidance, even the royal camel could not find it. So it wandered, protected by the same preservation spell that maintained its mistress, searching endlessly for a destination it could never locate alone. Malik glanced toward the massive animal resting peacefully beside the pool. Until now, until you, Farid corrected. Something about you enabled the Guardian to complete its journey. Perhaps because you approached without agenda or ambition, simply a man in need. He carefully rewrapped the journal. The princess's final words express hope that truth would prevail, that her death would not trigger bloodshed between peoples meant to be allies. His voice carried the weight of historical tragedy, a hope unfulfilled for 3 millennia. Until now, Malik repeated with growing resolve, we can still deliver her message. Farid regarded him with cautious optimism. The valley lies 3 days' journey from here, through terrain even more treacherous than what you've already crossed. Few outsiders have ever found it, fewer still were welcome. We have the original messenger and her guardian, Malik pointed out, and now we know the truth she carried. They departed the oasis at dawn, Farid insisting on accompanying Malik despite his advanced age. The valley people know me, he explained. My ancestors have maintained relations with them through generations. The old man had packed supplies efficiently, dried fruits, flat bread, and additional water skins. He carried his wooden staff and a small leather satchel containing the princess's journal and essential navigational tools. The official decree remained in its box, carefully secured in the cart beside the preserved royal messenger. Few travel this route, Farid said, as they passed through the narrow exit from the hidden oasis. But those who do often harbor ill intent. We must remain vigilant. The terrain grew increasingly rugged as they traveled eastward. Massive rock formations rose from the sand like the remnants of ancient fortresses, creating a labyrinth of natural corridors. The camel navigated with certainty, choosing paths that appeared impassable until the last moment. By midday, the sun's heat had become oppressive. Farid suggested resting in the shadow of a towering stone arch, its surface carved with weathered symbols similar to those on the cart. Another marker, he explained, tracing the faded glyphs with practiced fingers. The ancients left these to guide diplomatic missions between kingdoms. As they rested, Malik noticed the old man repeatedly scanning their surroundings with unusual intensity. You're expecting trouble, he observed. The princess's journal mentioned raiders who watched the ancient routes, Farid replied quietly. Some things change little across millennia. His caution proved precious. As they prepared to resume their journey, a flicker of movement caught Malik's attention, a shadow, where no shadow should be. Before he could speak, Farid pressed a finger to his lips in warning. Bandits, he whispered. They've been tracking us. As if summoned by the word, 5 men emerged from concealment behind nearby rocks. Their faces were wrapped in traditional desert style, but their equipment was modern. Durable hiking boots, tactical vests, and conspicuously new weapons, not traditional nomads, Malik observed tensely. Smugglers and antiquities thieves, Farid confirmed. They patrol these regions searching for undiscovered sites to plunder. The leader approached, his hand resting casually on a sheathed dagger. His eyes assessed their caravan with predatory calculation lingering on the ancient cart. Peace be upon you, travelers, he called in Arabic, his tone contradicting the traditional greeting. You've wandered far from marked paths. We journey by ancient routes, Farid responded, his posture straightening despite his age. We seek no conflict. The leader circled the cart, his gaze sharp with recognition of potential value. An interesting relic you transport. Museum piece, perhaps? Or private collection? Family heirloom, Malik interjected, of sentimental value only. A second bandit had approached the cart from behind, reaching stealthily for the covering fabric. The camel, seemingly docile until that moment, suddenly shifted position, blocking access with its massive body. The man jumped back, cursed. Your beast seems protective, the leader observed, his hand moving to the dagger's hilt. Makes me curious what it guards. Nothing that would interest you, Farid said firmly. We're simple travelers. Let us pass in peace. The leader smiled coldly. Perhaps we should inspect your heirloom to determine its value. These deserts hold many treasures worth significant sums to collectors who don't ask questions. He gestured to his companions, who began to spread out, encircling the cart. Malik tensed, acutely aware they were outnumbered and outarmed. Farid gripped his wooden staff tightly, its embedded stones catching the sunlight. Last chance to avoid bloodshed, the leader said, drawing his dagger. A modern tactical blade with a serrated edge. Step aside from the cart. What happened next occurred with bewildering speed. Farid struck the ground with his staff, and several of the embedded stones detached, hitting the sand with sharp cracks. Instantly, bright flashes erupted where they landed, releasing clouds of dense white smoke. Run, Farid shouted, pulling Malik toward a narrow passage between rock formations. Confusion erupted among the bandits, their shouts echoing through the stone corridors. Through swirling smoke, Malik glimpsed the camel charging directly at the leader, forcing him to dive aside. The cartwheels barely cleared the narrow gap as the massive animal followed them into the passage. They ran through twisting corridors of stone, the camel keeping pace despite its burden. Behind them, angry voices and footsteps grew fainter as the complex terrain separated them from their pursuers. When they finally stopped in a small protected alcove, Malik turned to find Farid leaning heavily on his staff, breathing with difficulty. A dark stain spread across the old man's side. You're injured, Malik exclaimed, moving quickly to examine the wound. Their leader is more skilled than I anticipated, Farid acknowledged grimly, revealing a deep knife slash across his ribs. I didn't dodge quickly enough. Malik helped him sit against a rock wall, then tore strips from his own shirt to create a makeshift bandage. The wound continued to bleed, despite his best efforts. We need to get you proper help, Malik insisted. Farid shook his head. The valley remains 2 days' journey through terrain, even more challenging than what we've crossed. You must continue without me. Night descended rapidly in the maze of stone corridors. Malik had managed to stabilize Farid's wound, but the old man's strength was clearly fading. They had found shelter in a deep recess within the rock formations, temporarily safe from the bandits, who still searched the labyrinth. "You cannot stay," Farid insisted, his voice weaker than before. "The princess's message has waited 3,000 years. It must reach its destination." "I won't leave you to die," Malik protested. Farid smiled faintly. "I am not afraid of that journey. My ancestors have guarded this path for generations, knowing this moment would eventually come." He reached into his satchel with trembling hands, extracting a metallic object that gleamed in the dim light. "Take this," he said, pressing it into Malik's palm. "A celestial navigation tool. The valley entrance can only be found when specific stars align with landmarks." The device resembled an astrolabe, but with unusual modifications. Multiple rotating discs were inscribed with symbols corresponding to constellations, while the central pointer contained a small crystal that captured and focused starlight. "3 alignments must be found," Farid explained, his breathing increasingly labored. "The royal star with the mountain peak, the 7 sisters with the split stone, and the hunter's belt with the twin pillars. Only then will the hidden path reveal itself." He demonstrated with shaking hands how to adjust the instrument's settings, aligning various markers to determine direction. "The Guardian knows the general path, but for the final approach, you must use this. The valley is protected by ancient ways that confuse the sense. Trust the stars, not your eyes." Malik absorbed the instructions, committing each detail to memory. His architectural training had included some astronomical knowledge. Ancient buildings were often aligned with celestial events, but this required precision beyond his experience. "What about the bandits?" he asked. "They won't abandon their pursuit easily. Dawn will reveal they've lost more than they know," Farid replied cryptically. "The Guardian protects its charge in ways not immediately apparent." Through the night, Malik tended to the old man's wound and prepared for departure. Farid drifted between consciousness and fevered sleep, occasionally murmuring instructions or warnings about the journey ahead. "The desert becomes a sea of glass," he warned during one lucid moment. "Step only where the Guardian steps. The ancient traps remain active." By morning, Farid's condition had stabilized but remained grave. "You must go now," he insisted. "Take the journal and navigation tool. Leave me water and continue eastward. The bandits will search south and west, expecting us to head toward known settlements." Reluctantly, Malik prepared to depart. He positioned Farid in a sheltered alcove, leaving him adequate water and provisions for several days. "I'll return with help," he promised. The old man smiled knowingly. "Complete the mission first. The valley people will know what to do." As Malik turned to leave, Farid caught his wrist with surprising strength. "Remember, the princess carries truth that can heal ancient wounds. Her journey transcends time itself. You were chosen to complete it." With those words echoing in his mind, Malik rejoined the camel waiting patiently outside their shelter. The massive animal knelt to allow adjustment of its burden, then rose with the same dignified purpose it had maintained throughout their journey. Alone now except for the silent camel and its preserved passenger, Malik felt the weight of responsibility descend fully upon him. He was no longer simply a failed architect seeking survival, but a messenger carrying historical truth with the power to resolve a 3,000-year-old tragedy. They traveled through the morning hours, the camel navigating the stone maze with unerring accuracy. By midday, the landscape changed dramatically. The rock formations gave way to a vast plain where the sand had fused into smooth glass-like surfaces, exactly as Farid had described. Malik watched carefully as the camel selected its path, placing his own feet precisely in the animal's tracks. Occasionally he glimpsed subtle disturbances in the terrain beside their route, depressions that might conceal ancient traps. As evening approached, he used the celestial navigation tool for the first time, aligning the royal star with a distant mountain peak, just as Farid had instructed. The instrument's crystal focused starlight into a precise beam that indicated their direction for the following day. That night, camped in the open without the protection of stone walls, Malik felt unusually exposed. The desert's silence seemed to press against him with physical weight. The stars above appeared impossibly bright, their patterns matching those inscribed on the navigation device with perfect precision. The camel rested nearby, its massive body providing some shelter from the cooling night air. Malik studied the princess's journal by starlight, seeking additional insights about the journey ahead. Her final entries, written with the clear understanding she was dying, displayed remarkable courage. "I go to join my ancestors," she had written, "but my truth continues toward its destination. May it bring the peace I could not deliver in life." Malik closed the journal, gazing toward the eastern horizon, where their destination lay hidden. "I'll complete your journey," he promised the silent figure in the cart. "Your truth will finally be delivered." The second day of solitary travel tested Malik's endurance beyond anything he had experienced. The glass desert gave way to terrain even more treacherous, a region of shifting sands that seemed to move with deliberate malice, aiming to divert their path southward. Only the camel's unwavering sense of direction kept them on course. By nightfall, Malik located the second celestial alignment Farid had described, the Seven Sisters constellation perfectly framing a split stone formation on the horizon. The navigation tool's crystal focused the starlight, confirming their route with a precision that modern GPS might envy. The third day brought them to a vast depression surrounded by towering cliffs. From a distance, the landscape appeared impassable, a geologic dead end that contradicted the navigation tool's guidance. The camel continued without hesitation, approaching the base of the tallest cliff, where twin stone pillars flanked what seemed to be a solid rock face. As sunset approached, Malik aligned the navigation device one final time. The Hunter's Belt constellation appeared directly above the twin pillars, and the focused beam of starlight revealed something extraordinary. A narrow fissure in the rock, invisible from even a few meters away. "The hidden entrance," Malik whispered. The camel approached the fissure, which widened slightly as they drew near. The cart would barely fit through the opening, requiring precise navigation. Malik held his breath as the massive animal maneuvered with surprising delicacy, the cart wheels clearing the stone edges by mere centimeters. The passage twisted sharply, then descended at a steep angle into absolute darkness. Malik placed his hand on the camel's side for guidance, trusting the animal's superior night vision. The air grew noticeably cooler as they descended, carrying unfamiliar scents: vegetation, water, perhaps even cooking fires. After what seemed an eternity of careful descent, the passage leveled and widened. A faint glow appeared ahead, gradually strengthening until Malik could discern the path. The source of illumination soon became apparent. Massive stone sentinels carved in the form of seated lions, their eyes containing some luminescent material that cast soft blue light along the corridor. These guardian statues matched symbols depicted on the cart's exterior panels, images Malik had initially dismissed as decorative, but now recognized as navigational markers. The camel paused before the first pair of sentinels, then proceeded only when Malik placed his hand on a hieroglyphic panel positioned between them. The passage continued past 7 pairs of guardian statues, each slightly different in pose and inscription. Beyond the final pair, the narrow corridor opened suddenly onto a site that halted Malik mid-step. Before him spread a hidden valley of impossible beauty and proportion. Protected on all sides by towering cliffs, the basin contained a thriving ecosystem untouched by the outside world. Terraced fields of cultivated crops descended toward a central lake, fed by waterfall cascades from the surrounding heights. Stone structures reminiscent of ancient Egyptian architecture, yet distinctly different in style, dotted the landscape in organized clusters. Most remarkable were the people visible in the distance, figures moving with purpose among the structures, tending fields, carrying water from the central lake. Their clothing suggested neither modern Egyptian fashion nor traditional Bedouin garb, but something that might have been depicted in New Kingdom tomb paintings. "Impossible," Malik whispered, his academic understanding of history crumbling before the evidence of his eyes. The camel continued forward, emerging fully from the passage onto a stone-paved plaza that marked the valley entrance. Immediately, alarm spread among the nearest cluster of inhabitants. Calls echoed across the valley in a language that sounded like ancient Egyptian, yet contained unfamiliar elements. Within minutes, a delegation approached the plaza, a group of men and women in formal attire that combined practical design with ceremonial elements. They moved with the cautious precision of those encountering something both expected and feared. Their leader, a gray-haired woman whose bearing suggested authority without ostentation, stepped forward. She carried an ornate staff similar to Farid's, though larger and more elaborately decorated with embedded stones. Her gaze moved from Malik to the camel, then fixed with evident shock on the cart and its covered contents. She spoke a phrase in the unfamiliar language, then switched to heavily accented Arabic when Malik failed to respond. "The Guardian returns," she said, unconsciously echoing Farid's first words to Malik. "After so many generations, I bring the royal messenger," Malik replied, choosing his words carefully. "Princess Nefertari of the Fourth Kingdom, who began her journey 3,000 years ago." Murmurs spread through the delegation, expressions of disbelief mixing with what appeared to be awe. The leader raised her staff, silencing the reactions. Her eyes studied Malik with penetrating intensity. "How came you to guide the Guardian?" she asked. "You are not of our people, nor of the royal line." "I found them in the desert," Malik explained simply. "Or perhaps they found me. I was guided here by Farid, keeper of the way station, who remains injured in the stone labyrinth." At the mention of Farid, recognition flickered in the woman's eyes. "The keeper sent you." When Malik nodded, she turned to confer briefly with her companions in their native tongue. Returning her attention to Malik, she announced formally, "I am Tahamet, elder of the Valley Council. You and the royal messenger will be received according to the ancient protocols." Her voice softened slightly. After so long, we had ceased to believe this day would come. The valley people escorted Malik and his unusual caravan to a circular plaza at the settlement's center. The camel and cart remained under guard while Malik was led to a stone building that served as both council chamber and ceremonial space. Inside, elders representing different aspects of valley life gathered around a central fire pit where aromatic woods burned with minimal smoke. Tahamet guided Malik to a stone bench, then presented him with a ceremonial bowl carved from alabaster. The vessel contained clear water infused with herbs unfamiliar to him. "The welcome drink," she explained, "offered to all diplomatic visitors since our ancestors first settled this valley." The ritual significance was unmistakable. By accepting, Malik would be acknowledged as an official messenger rather than an intruder. He drank as custom required, finding the liquid refreshing, with subtle notes of mint and something sweeter. "Now you may speak as one recognized by the valley," Tahamet announced. Malik recounted his journey, from his desperate desert wandering to the discovery of the camel and cart, his meeting with Farid, and the revelations contained in the princess's journal. The elders listened without interruption, though their expressions experienced varying degrees of astonishment and skepticism. When he finished, Tahamet spoke. "Your tale would be dismissed as fantasy were it not accompanied by the Guardian and the royal cart. These are known to us, through our histories, artifacts of a diplomatic mission that never arrived." "You've been expecting them for 3,000 years, Malik asked incredulously. A male elder with intricate tattoos marking his role as historian responded, "Not actively expecting, but our records maintained the account. The princess was to deliver terms of alliance between our ancestors and the Fourth Kingdom, including her marriage to our crown prince. When she never arrived," Tahamet continued, "the Fourth Kingdom accused our people of assassination. War followed, devastating both societies. Our ancestors retreated deeper into isolation, using ancient knowledge to conceal this valley from the outside world. You've remained hidden ever since," Malik surmised, his architect's mind calculating the extraordinary effort required to maintain such isolation across millennia. "We preserved what was most valuable," the historian explained. "While empires rose and fell beyond our borders, We maintained the old knowledge, the sacred writing, the building techniques, the agricultural methods. Tahamet gestured toward the settlement visible through the doorway. What you see is not a primitive community clinging to the past, but a society that chose a different path of development. We adopted only those innovations that served our values while rejecting those that would harm our independence. This explained the contradictions Malik had observed. Buildings that combined ancient design with sophisticated engineering, clothing that appeared traditional yet incorporated practical innovation, tools that seemed simple at first glance, but demonstrated complex craftsmanship upon closer examination. How many live in the valley, he asked. Approximately 3,000, Tahamet answered. Our population remains stable by design. We understand the valley's carrying capacity and live within its limits, the historian added. We are not completely isolated. Selected members journey outside for specific purposes, gathering information, trading for essential materials, monitoring the changing worlds. They return with knowledge that our council evaluates for potential adoption. This revelation stunned Malik. You have representatives in modern Egypt and beyond, Tahamet confirmed. Some serve as scholars in your university, others work in museums protecting artifacts that would otherwise be misunderstood or exploited. A few occupy positions in government offices that might impact our continued security. Yet none have revealed your existence, Malik noted. Loyalty to the valley transcends other considerations, she explained simply. Those who leave understand their sacred obligation to protect our way of life. A new elder joined the conversation, a woman whose elaborate necklace marked her role as spiritual leader. The princess's arrival fulfills an ancient prophecy, she said. Our oldest texts speak of truth returning when most needed, carried by one who walks between worlds. Malik shifted uncomfortably at the implication. I'm just an architect who found himself in extraordinary circumstances. Perhaps, the spiritual leader replied with a knowing smile. Or perhaps the guardian chose you precisely because you bridge ancient understanding and modern knowledge. An architect appreciates how past and present connect. Before Malik could respond, Tahamet redirected the conversation. The royal messenger must be formally received before we examine her diplomatic cargo. Our traditions require specific ceremonies to honor one of her status, especially after such an unprecedented journey. She turned to Malik. You will participate as the one who completed the final stage of her mission. Rest tonight. Tomorrow we will conduct the reception of the royal envoy, according to ancient protocol. As the council dispersed, the historian remained to guide Malik to his accommodations, a small but comfortable dwelling near the central plaza. The building incorporated design elements Malik recognized from various ancient Egyptian periods, yet with modifications that improved functionality without sacrificing aesthetic harmony. Your professional eye appreciates our architecture, the historian observed, noting Malik's analytical gaze. It's remarkable, Malik admitted. You've preserved techniques lost to the outside world while continuing to innovate within your tradition. The balance of preservation and adaptation defines our society, the historian replied. Perhaps this is why the Guardian brought the princess to us now, because the outside world has finally reached a point where it might understand what we've maintained. Dawn brought a flurry of ceremonial preparations throughout the valley. Residents adorned buildings with flowers and symbolic banners, while specially designated attendants prepared the central plaza for the formal reception. The camel had been given a place of honor, treated with reverence that confirmed its special status in valley traditions. Malik was provided ceremonial attire, simple but elegant garments that echoed ancient Egyptian style, while incorporating subtle valley modifications. The fabric felt remarkably comfortable, woven with techniques that created a cooling effect in the desert heat. Tahamet arrived at mid-morning, accompanied by a delegation of elders. It is time, she announced. The council has agreed to open the royal decree, a message 3 millennia in delivery. The princess's cart had been positioned at the plaza center, Surrounded by carved stone benches arranged in concentric circles, valley residents gathered in solemn attendance, their silence conveying the event's historical significance. Malik noted how they organized themselves by family groups, each distinguished by subtle variations in dress and adornment. Tahamit gestured for Malik to join her beside the cart. As the one who completed the final stage of the Guardian's journey, you must participate in unsealing the royal message. The wooden box containing the decree had been placed on a ceremonial stand, its simple design contrasting with the elaborate setting. Tahamit indicated that Malik should remove the lid while she recited formal phrases in the ancient valley language. Inside the box lay a papyrus scroll secured with a royal seal that remained unbroken after 3,000 years. The historian elder carefully removed it, handling the ancient document with practiced skill. Despite its age, the papyrus remained remarkably intact, other testament to the preservation magic that had maintained both messenger and message. In accordance with diplomatic protocol, Tahamit announced, the decree will be read in both royal and valley languages. The historian unrolled the scroll with reverential care, revealing elegant hieroglyphics in formal arrangement. He began reading in the ancient Egyptian of the Fourth Kingdom, each phrase measured and precise. After each section, Tahamit translated into the valley language for the assembled community. The decree began with formal royal titles and acknowledgments of the valley people's sovereignty, diplomatic courtesies, establishing the relationship between kingdoms. It continued with expressions of regret for past misunderstandings and outlined specific terms for a comprehensive alliance. Most significantly, it confirmed Princess Nefertari's betrothal to the Valley Crown Prince, a union intended to bind the kingdoms through blood ties and mutual interest. The princess was to remain in the valley for 1 year, learning its customs before the formal wedding ceremony that would take place in the Fourth Kingdom capital with full royal honors. As the reading continued, Malik observed the emotional impact on the valley resident. Many wept openly, while others clasped hands in evident solidarity. The decree represented not just a diplomatic formality, but the alternative history their society might have experienced, an alliance rather than war, integration rather than isolation. When the historian reached the final section, his voice faltered briefly. This portion, written in a slightly different hand, appeared to be a personal message from the Fourth Kingdom pharaoh to the valley leader. Our kingdoms have much to teach one another. The message read, your people possess knowledge my scholars have sought for generations. Mine controlled trade routes that would bring prosperity to your valley. Together we could create a legacy to endure for thousands of years. I send my daughter not as a political token, but as a sincere gesture of my desire for lasting peace. She carries my complete trust and authority to finalize the terms of our alliance. The historian carefully re-rolled the scroll after completing the reading. Silence held the assembly for several heartbeats before Tahamit spoke. 3,000 years ago, our ancestors were accused of murdering this princess, a crime they did not commit. That false accusation led to war that ultimately destroyed both kingdoms. Her voice carried across the silent plaza. Today we finally receive the truth she gave her life to deliver. She turned to address Malik directly. The outside world knows nothing of this history. The Fourth Kingdom exists only in fragmentary archaeological records. Our valley appears on no map. Yet the princess's journey connects these separated worlds across time itself. From within the cart, attendants carefully lifted the preserved princess, still resting on her cushioned platform. In the clear morning light, her serene expression and remarkable preservation drew gasps from those close enough to observe details. The valley people bowed their heads in respect as she was carried to a specially prepared pavilion adjacent to the council building. Tonight we will hold council to determine how to respond to this message from the distant past, Tahamit announced. Though the kingdoms it sought to unite no longer exist in their original form, the underlying truth it carries remains relevant. She placed her hand on the cart's ancient wood. The princess and her guardian completed their mission against impossible odds. We must consider carefully what that completion means for our future, As the formal ceremony concluded, Malik found himself approached by the spiritual leader he'd met previously. "You've witnessed something few outsiders could comprehend," she said. "A message traveling across time itself to deliver truth when it was finally ready to be received." "But why now?" Malik asked. "After 3,000 years?" She smiled enigmatically. "Perhaps because now, finally, both worlds are ready for reconciliation." Evening transformed the valley into a landscape of gentle illumination. Lamps similar to those Malik had seen at the oasis lit pathways between buildings, their steady flames requiring no apparent fuel. The central plaza had been rearranged for the ceremony of completion, an ancient ritual performed when diplomatic missions reached their destination. Normally conducted while the messenger still lived, the historian explained, as he guided Malik through preparation. "But our traditions include provisions for posthumous completion in extraordinary circumstances." Malik had been assigned a significant role as the final bearer of the message. His ceremonial attire now included a sash woven with symbols representing both the outside world and the valley, a visual acknowledgement of his unique position, bridging separated societies. At the plaza's center stood a ritual fire bowl, a massive copper vessel supported by 3 carved stone lions. Its rim bore inscriptions from both Fourth Kingdom and Valley languages, marking its purpose in diplomatic ceremonies. The bowl remained empty, awaiting the ceremony's commencement. As night fully descended, Valley residents gathered in formal arrangement around the plaza. Family groups occupied designated positions according to ancient social organization, with elders forming an inner circle closest to the ceremonial space. Tahamet approached Malik, her formal attire denoting her role as lead representative. "The council has deliberated on the proper response to the princess's message," she said. "Though the specific alliance she proposed belongs to history, the underlying intention, reconciliation between separated peoples, remains relevant." She handed him a small wooden box, similar to the one that had contained the royal decree. "This holds our formal reply not to the long-vanished Fourth Kingdom, but to the world you represent. It acknowledges our willingness to establish limited, careful contact with outside scholars and institutions that demonstrate appropriate respect for our tradition." Malik accepted the box with appropriate gravity. "I'm honored to serve as messenger, though I'm merely an architect, not a diplomat." "Perhaps that is precisely why the Guardian brought you," Tahamet suggested. "You understand how to connect old foundations with new structures while maintaining integrity in both." The ceremony began with procession of the princess's preserved body, carried by designated attendants to a position of honor beside the ritual fire bowl. The camel followed without guidance, taking its place as if familiar with the protocol. Its ancient eyes watched proceedings with the same patient dignity it had maintained throughout the journey. Valley musicians played instruments Malik recognized from tomb paintings, harps, flutes, and percussion instruments, producing harmonies both familiar and exotic to his modern ear. The melody combined ceremonial solemnity with undertones of culmination and release. Tahamet raised her staff, and silence fell across the assembly. "Tonight we complete a journey begun 3 millennia ago," she announced, her voice carrying clearly in the still air. "Princess Nefertari of the Fourth Kingdom gave her life to deliver truth. Though she could not prevent the war that followed her disappearance, her perseverance ensures that history is finally corrected." The historian stepped forward, reciting from memory the key points of the royal decree. Each section was acknowledged by assembled elders with formal gestures of acceptance, a diplomatic protocol preserved through generations for this specific purpose. When the recitation concluded, Tahamet turned to Malik. "As final bearer of the message, you must place the royal decree into the ritual fire bowl. This symbolizes its formal delivery and acceptance." Malik carefully placed the original scroll into the copper vessel. Rather than immediately igniting, it remained intact, awaiting the ceremony's next phase. "Now the valley's response," Tahamet directed. Malik added the small wooden box containing the valley's reply to the modern world. As both message and response rested together in the bowl, Tahamet approached with a ceremonial torch. "With this flame, we acknowledge completion of the diplomatic mission," she intoned. The messenger's duty is fulfilled. The guardian's journey ends. Truth passes from history into memory, having accomplished its purpose. She lowered the torch to the bowl's contents. Instead of conventional fire, the items were enveloped in cool blue flame that consumed neither scroll nor box, but transformed them into pure light that rose skyward in a brilliant column. Valley residents raised their hands toward the illumination, reciting phrases in their ancient language. The camel watched this transformation with evident recognition, its posture relaxing as if a great burden had finally been lifted. For the first time since Malik had encountered the remarkable animal, it made a sound, a soft rumble that somehow conveyed profound satisfaction. As the blue light gradually faded, Tiamat addressed Malik directly. "The princess's journey is complete, but yours continues. You return to the outside world carrying knowledge few have possessed, the true history of our people, the reality of our continued existence, and our cautious willingness to establish limited contact." She presented him with a new object, a compass unlike any he had seen. Its housing combined materials from both ancient and modern worlds, while its directional indicator incorporated a crystal similar to the one in the celestial navigation tool. "This will guide you back to your world," she explained. "But it also maintains connection to our should circumstances warrant renewed contact. It will lead you and only you back to our valley." The spiritual leader joined them, adding, "The guardian's duty to the princess is fulfilled after 3,000 years of faithful service, but its connection to you remains. Some journeys end while others begin within the same ceremony." As if confirming her words, the massive camel approached Malik, lowering its head in a gesture unmistakably meant for him. When he hesitantly placed his hand on its forehead, a profound sense of connection flowed between them. Acknowledgement of shared purpose that transcended ordinary human-animal relationship. 1 month later, Malik stood on the balcony of his new apartment in Cairo, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in hues of amber and gold. The view reminded him of desert horizons and hidden valleys, landscapes that had transformed his understanding of both past and present. His shared journey had proceeded with surprising ease. Valley guides had escorted him to the stone labyrinth, where they found Farid recovered from his wound, having been secretly tended by valley healers, familiar with desert routes. Together they traveled to the oasis, then onward to civilization, their path mysteriously free of the bandits who had threatened their earlier journey. Upon reaching Cairo, Malik discovered his professional reputation had been quietly rehabilitated. Documents proving his innocence in the failed architectural project had emerged through an anonymous source in the antiquities department. Job offers awaited, including a prestigious position, consulting on preservation of historical structures, work that would bridge his modern training with newfound appreciation for ancient techniques. The compass from the valley rested on his desk, its unique design concealed within the housing of what appeared to be an antique navigator's tool. Only Malik recognized the crystal at its center as the connection to a civilization that existed beyond conventional maps and history. Beside it lay a journal where he recorded his experiences, though not for public sharing. The Valley Council had been clear about conditions for their emerging contact with the outside world. Only selected scholars demonstrating appropriate respect would be granted limited access, beginning with research partnerships focused on architectural preservation and agricultural techniques. Malik's role as intermediary had been formalized through Valley protocols and recognized by certain highly placed officials within Egypt's cultural institutions, individuals he now recognized as Valley representatives who had been positioned in the modern world for generations. The princess had received proper burial within the valley, her remarkable preservation maintained long enough for thorough documentation by Valley historians before natural processes were allowed to proceed. Her courage in attempting to prevent war and her determination to deliver truth, despite betrayal, had been commemorated in ceremonies combining Fourth Kingdom and Valley traditions. Most profound was Malik's continuing relationship with the Guardian. Released from its centuries-long duty to the princess, the remarkable camel had chosen to accompany him back to Cairo. It now resided at a small farm outside the city, maintained by a valley representative who ensured its unique nature remained undetected by conventional veterinary examination. Malik visited weekly, their connection deepening beyond ordinary human-animal relationships. The ancient creature seemed to be enjoying its retirement, though its eyes still held the wisdom and patience acquired through millennia of faithful service. A knock at his door interrupted these reflections. He welcomed Farid, now recovered and serving officially as his assistant, but actually functioning as liaison with valley leadership. The museum director approved our proposal, the older man announced. The exhibition on Fourth Kingdom diplomatic practices will open next season, incorporating appropriate valley artifacts on limited loan. And the princess? Malik asked. She will be acknowledged as a historical figure whose diplomatic mission ended tragically, though the full circumstances remain respectfully private, Farid replied. Her contribution to historical understanding will be recognized without exposing the valley's continued existence. This balanced approach reflected the Valley Council's careful strategy, selective sharing of knowledge without risking their community's security. The truth would emerge gradually through academic channels, positioned as archaeological discoveries rather than revelations of a living culture. There's more, Farid added, his expression lightening. The council has approved your architectural proposal. You'll consult on restoration of the Oasis way station, incorporating both traditional methods and modern stabilization technique. For Malik, this project represented perfect synthesis of his journey, applying his professional skills to preserve ancient knowledge while creating sustainable connection between separated worlds. The failed architect, who had stumbled dying through the desert, had discovered purpose far beyond personal redemption. That evening, Malik added a final entry to his private journal. When I encountered the camel dragging its cart through the desert, I was a man without direction, certain only of approaching death. What I discovered inside, a young princess who had sacrificed everything to deliver truth, changed not just my circumstances, but my understanding of purpose itself. Her mission spanned 3,000 years, preserved by ancient magic and unfailing dedication. What appeared initially as tragedy, her death before reaching her destination, became something more profound, a message traveling across time itself, arriving precisely when both worlds were prepared to receive it. The compass on my desk points two directions simultaneously, toward a hidden valley, where ancient ways endure, and toward a future, where separated knowledge might finally reconnect. Like the princess, I've become a messenger between worlds, though my journey continues rather than concludes. Perhaps that's what I glimpsed in the cart that day. Not just the preserved body of a royal envoy, but the enduring power of truth to transcend death, time, and separation. What made a starving man forget his hunger was recognition that some journeys matter beyond individual survival. The princess completed her mission after 3 millennia. I can only hope to serve mine with comparable dedication.